It is Locked On Jazz for the 30th of November. Where has the defense gone? We're ranked 30th over the last 5 games, and we're not forcing any turnovers. We'll talk about that. Some offensive numbers are awfully impressive, though, by Collin Sexton recently, and who's most impacted by not having Mike Conley on the floor in shooting. And the Clippers are in the house, third time we play them, and they've gotten hot without PG and without Kawhi Leonard. How are they doing it? We'll talk about it all coming up on today's edition of Locked On Jazz. Pow.
You are Locked On Jazz, your daily podcast on the Utah Jazz. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
How are you? I'm David Locke, radio voice of the Utah Jazz, Jazz NBA insider. This is Locked On Jazz, your daily podcast on the Utah Jazz, giving you insight, expertise, geeky numbers, and most of all, hopefully making it way better to be a Jazz fan each and every day. Thanks so very much for making Locked On Jazz our first listen every single day. We are free. We are on all your podcasting apps. The one you're listening to right now is the easiest one to find it because that's where you already found it. And we're also on YouTube where we have good chat rooms going on, good community. Try to premiere that if we're on a regular schedule, which we are right now at 8:30 every morning. It's kind of nice. Slept in the same bed a few nights in a row. It's kind of great. I kind of love it. All right. The Jazz defense has left the building. And we're going to talk about that today. There are some really fun offensive numbers of guys developing with this opportunity to spread their wings, as we kind of are referring to it even more. And there are some guys that without Mike Conley are really being impacted because the ball's not popping and moving like it kind of once did. So we're going to touch on all of those things on the show and then get you ready for the Clippers game tonight, 7 o'clock tonight, LA Clippers coming up. Today's show is brought to you by Sweat Block. If you or someone you love is experiencing embarrassing sweat or odor, try Sweat Block. Save 20% with promo code LOCKEDON at sweatblock.com, available on Amazon as well. All right, so, we talked about yesterday that we're losing the clutch without Mike. That we kind of think have established. That one's pretty obvious. But the other thing that's happened is our defense is gone, like gone. We're 30th in the NBA in defense over the last 5 games. So that's last. Our defensive rating is a 122.9. I'll be honest, I was not expecting the lack of Mike Conley to suddenly cause the defense to fall apart. That's a little different than I think most of us expected, frankly. Why? The only thought I can have is that Mike has you in order and structure at all times, and so therefore you're not being mismatched or caught off guard as often as we are right now in transition, would be one of the ideas. The other is it could just be happenstance. And the other is that Mike's actually just really a lot better on the ball than we realize. He had a really good pick and roll defensive year last year with Rudy, and the feeling was, well, that's because of Rudy. And then the other feeling was that, we all remember Jalen Brunson kind of bogarting him in the paint and overwhelming him, but there aren't actually that many guys who do that. And so I think that can get a little misleading that you're not we see it, it jumps out to you. However, when you dig into that, I think what you find out is that, well, maybe actually that doesn't happen as often as you think. So I think Mike's better defensively than any of us realize. So if you look over the last 5 games, our defensive rating is a 122.9. Portland's is a 121.1. League average is a 113.0. So we're nearly 10 points, exactly, 9.9. 10 points worse than the average team in the NBA defensively right now. That's a lot. Our offense is still kind of cooking. We're 7th. We talked about the greatest offense in the NBA in Boston. They're 127, and so they're 15 points over the last 5 games better than everyone else. So we're 10 points worse than league average. So what's going on with that? What's the reason for it? This is where you dig into those 4 factors: the effective field goal percentage, the free throw rate, and the defensive turnovers. And so the first one is allowing how we're doing against the shot. Well, this is super interesting. We're actually defending the shot really well. We're 13th in the league in effective field goal percentage defense over the last 5 games. Well, that's super good. Like, that's a really, really good sign. That's okay. That's the number one most important thing, is to defend the shot. The other one we're really good at is shot distribution, which I think is important sign of good coaching, is if you look at the shot frequency of what we've been, and this is, look at it since the Portland game. I know I walked away from the mic. So we look back to the 20th of November. Feels like it's been longer than that. Look back at the 20th of November, which is the day after the Portland game. You just get our 5 games, and you look at our shot distribution. You actually, we're doing a pretty good job. We're the number one team in denying threes in this time period, where our offense is the worst. Where our defense is the worst. We're the number one team in the league in where people are taking their shots from in those 5 games. Our location effective field goal percentage is 52.6. We're 8th in the league in defending the rim, denying the rim. Number 1 in the league in not allowing threes. We're 27% not allowing threes. Like, incredible number. Great. These are like super signs. Like us, Phoenix, Atlanta, and really us and Phoenix. Atlanta's allowing 32% of their shots as threes. Jazz and Phoenix are allowing 27%. So this is like super good sign if you're trying to figure out, what's going on with the team, what's gone wrong. Like, this would bother me is if since November 20th, which is the first game, 21st against Clippers, first game we played without Mike. So to some extent, what's happening here is we are getting a little bit unlucky. Teams are shooting 48% on corner threes against us all of a sudden. Short sample size, they're 14 of 29. Teams are shooting 39% from 3 against us, which is 52 of 133. And teams are up to 71% at the rim against us, which I think is related to some other things. But the two things, like, your defense is horrendous. If you can't defend the shot, you got no chance. Okay, what gets interesting here next, though, is you start to look at us. So then how come if we're defending the shot well and our defense has completely left the building and we're the worst defensive team in the league and we're 10 points worse than league average? Like, those numbers are daunting. Like, let's not, despite the positivity of what I just gave you, let's not, pretend that those other ones didn't exist right there. So what is going on? Well, we're 29th in the league in forcing turnovers all of a sudden. The whole concept of what we wanted to be as a team was this chaos creating turnover machine. And early in the year we're 29th in the league in forcing turnovers over the last 5 games. We're only 12% of our possessions were turnovers, so we're just allowing teams to get a ton of shots off. We were forcing turnovers, getting out, running off them a little bit, and we were wrecking some havoc. But that's just not actually happening anymore. We've I think, at forced turnovers, 7 or fewer turnovers in 3 of the last 4 games, which, makes it hard for us to live because that's not what we want to do. The other one is we're not rebounding at all. Okay, so we're doing a nice job against the shot, which is incredible that we can have that kind of shot distribution and also be last in the NBA in defensive rebounding. Not just in clutch. We talked about it yesterday in clutch, that our defensive rebounding rate is below 50% in the final 5 minutes of games right now. It's been obviously true, but we're allowing overall 34% of the opponent's missed shots to be grabbed by offensive rebounds. So we're the worst defensive team in the league right now because we're not forcing any turnovers, and then we're giving them extra possessions over the last 5 games since Mike's gone out. Mike's not a great rebounder, but that's the answer. Those are, to some extent, maybe fixable. Like, we're not a great rebounding team. Will Hardy said it the other day. It's got to be a group effort and a ton of different guys getting in there and helping with rebounds. It has to be, and we just can't have, the mass offensive rebounding, particularly late fourth quarter in a close game that we've seen happening take place. They're not forcing turnovers is either teams got used to it. All of these could be items of teams reacting and understanding. Or 2 is we got tired. Which, when everyone asked early in the year, is this sustainable? That's really what they're asking. It's like, hey, when the season starts to wear you down, can you actually still do these things? Part of the problem might be that for whatever reason with Mike Conley not in the starting lineup. Our starting lineup's defensive rating is pretty horrendous. It's a 128. So we're 124 in the last 5 games. This is a little worse, 128. And for whatever reason, Collin Sexton and Jared Vanderbilt's plus-minus defensively are really bad. We're 11 points worse when Vanderbilt's on the floor, and we're 12 points worse when Sexton's on the floor defensively. So it's not entirely clear, maybe it has to do a little bit with the tone setting. Despite the way it feels, we're actually not fouling at an outrageous rate. We're middle of the pack on fouling. Really, the problem is defensively, and this is crazy that this can drive you to 30th. The Clippers' offense is the opposite of this, though, and I'll talk about this later, is we're 29th in the league not in forcing turnovers, and we're 30th in the league in defensive rebounding. And so despite the fact we're 14th in the league in defending the shot, which is really good, and despite the fact that we're the number 1 team in forcing teams to take shots in the right places, which is fabulous, those 2 items, lack of forcing turnovers and lack of defensive rebounding over the last 5 games, have led the Jazz to be the worst defensive team in the NBA. It's kind of wild, actually. Hey, it's a Wednesday edition of Locked On Jazz, and today's show is brought to you by Intercap Lending and Steve Carter. I got to do it yesterday. I loved it. It's a little slower right now, certainly for some people, but I loved it. I got the email, hey, could you introduce me to Steve Carter? And then promptly what happens? But Steve Carter responds to Isaac immediately. Isaac, great to meet you. Love to set up a time where we can look at the loan options and see which one best fits you. Because Steve Carter over at Intercap Lending is simply the best dude that I've ever dealt with. Intercap Lending is a local a company which does serve all the states. It's just growing and growing. Why? Because they get deals done. Steve Carter's our own personal loan officer, and he's just simply the best. We love him. He just makes us all happy because he does a great job, and he takes bonehead people like me who can't focus on anything and get anything done, and he gets us through the mortgage process. I've used him twice. Our COO's used him. Numerous lockdown people have used him. It's all over at Intercap Lending. NMLS number 19, or actually Steve's number is 1178666. Ooh, that's a little freaky. You can call Steve Carter at 385-800-8528, or you can do exactly what Isaac did this week, and you can email me at dlock09@gmail.com. We appreciate it so much when you trust us and when you support our sponsors. Steve Carter over at Intercap Lending is our own personal loan officer. He'll give you the Locked On Jazz corporate discount, so if you call him directly, make sure you mention Locked On Jazz. But if you want to go through me, email me at dlock09@gmail.com, and I'll set up your meeting with Steve Carter over at Intercap Lending. Today's show is also brought to you by Sweat Block. Those embarrassing moments where the sweat gets the best of you, whether it's a presentation, a dinner, maybe it's a high school kid who's got a prom date or something like that. All of those things out there, and it's never a great time to have embarrassing sweat. So, therefore, we have got Sweat Block for you. Pamela, who hid in the office bathroom every 30 minutes to dry off her armpits so no one would see the wet circles under her arm, finally has her life back because of Sweat Block. The stories are endless. Sweat Block gives you the confidence to wear what you want without embarrassing sweat. Sweat Block wipes were featured and tested on Rachel Ray's show by firefighters. And if you or someone you love is experiencing embarrassing sweat or odor, try Sweat Block. Save 20% with the promo code LOCKEDON at sweatblock.com. It's also available at Amazon, but like 20% off at sweatblock.com by using the promo code LOCKEDON. Thanks so much for making Locked On Jazz your first listen of the day. For your second listen today, how about Locked On Sports Today? If you checked it out yet, 22 minutes of sports coverage for you, giving you everything you need, updating on all the biggest stories, catching you up, and then letting it roll for the rest of the day for you. Plus, Game to Game in the NBA, always a great way. Boy, that show's good. I really love NBA Game to Game at Locked On NBA, I have to tell you. All right, I want to look at some of the offensive numbers and shooting numbers without Mike Conley, because I think there's a few players who are really being dramatically impacted by it. And then I think there's some players who are really rising up and doing some pretty incredible stuff right now. The 2 guys that I think are most impacted right now by it are Malik Beasley. So in the last 5 games, and Jordan Clarkson. Last 5 games, Malik Beasley is 11 of 37 on catch and shoot threes. Well, on catch and shoot threes for the season, Malik is 42%. So before the injury to Mike Conley, Malik Beasley on catch and shoot threes had made 48 of 105, 46%. And since Mike Conley's been out on catch and shoot threes, which are set up by somebody making the right pass at the right time, he's down to 30%. So he's gone from 47% to 30% on catch and shoot threes. This, if you recall, either postcast, in our broadcast, or on this, the minute Mike Conley went down, I said Malik Beasley is going to be the one impacted by this the most. Is not only did Mike Conley know how to find Malik Beasley, but Mike Conley puts the pass there perfectly. Our offense over the last 5 games has been fine. It's really a tribute to everyone involved that the offense has been fine over the last 5 games, despite everything that this team, despite like how hard it is to play without your point guard. It's a great sign for what Will Hardy's building and what this team is, because for them to be able to do this is awfully impressive. The team's shooting in the last 5 games is 8th best in the NBA. Their turnover rate, which feels like it should be really, really high without Mike Conley, is actually just in the middle of the pack at 15th. And then the offensive rebounding, which has definitely been a signature, actually is 14th in the league. So they're not doing anything exceptional there, and they're not going to line a huge amount right now. They're just kind of shooting it pretty well, holding it together offensively in over 5-game stretch in a fairly impressive fashion. This is the team that's been the number 1 or 2 offense in the league, and they're 7th, but I still think it's pretty darn good to see. Beasley has been negatively impacted by it. Markkanen has been incredible. Lowry, who probably is not at 7 feet, is dependent on everybody else, is just nailing. He's 17 of his last 37 on catch and shoot threes. He's shooting 46%. So he's really nailing that. The other one is Clarkson. Clarkson's been forced to take a ton more off the bounce threes because he's got the ball in his hands, he's got to play in that fashion, or he's rushing. He feels as though he's probably got to keep going. In the 5, we've now played, what are we now? 23 games? 23 games. So in the first 18 games of the year, Jordan Clarkson's off the bounce 3 rate, he had taken 48 off the bounce threes in the first 17 games of the year, so about 2.5 a game. And in the last 5 games, he's taking 3.5 a game. So he's up 1. That's definitely, he's 2 of 17 on off the bounce threes in the last 5 games. Those looks just are not as clean. They're not as good. He's got the ball in his hands. They're zeroed in on him. There's no one else for them to look to. His world is just vastly different right now than it was. He was shooting 49% on off the bounce threes, usually probably coming off other action prior to Mike Conley's injury. Now that's an unnatural number too. Like Jordan's not going to hold that, but he's not at 12% off the bounce 3-point shooter either. So that one's been tough. Now some of our guys are really doing some pretty cool stuff. And namely Collin Sexton, who, this would be what the criticism of Collin Sexton has been in his career, is that he does well without helping his teammates. I think we've seen the opposite. I think we've seen him really, really work hard to try to tap into his teammates. But if you look at what we're doing just in our drive game, this is how we're going to generate our offense. We're driving the basket. We're making plays. Jordan's obviously got the largest burden right now over the last 5 games. He's had 85 drives. Collin's had 65. Those are the 2 guys running the offense. Collin's averaging 1.36 points per drive over the last 5 games. I would take a quick gander to guess that that's one of the highest rates of anyone in the NBA. I'll try to see if I can quickly do that. I did not do that beforehand, but I'll see if I can. The best in the league who has had, we probably have to, who's had at least 20 drives in the last 5 games, that's 4 a game, is Kelly Olynyk at 1.44. And Collin Sexton is 2nd. And Jordan Clarkson is 3rd. So we've really opened up this kind of awesome drive game that's going on right now over the last 5 games. Some of these numbers seem a little off to me, to be honest with you, because I don't see, some of these numbers, something's off on my numbers here. Just so let's stop on that for a second. For some reason, looks to me like I'm only getting certain teams right now. Not sure why that happened. Not sure why. Okay, just roll with it. Let's ignore that. But the fact of the matter is that Olynyk, Sexton, and Clarkson on games in which, on the drive game without Mike Conley, have been great. They've really picked up the slack there and done some pretty incredible stuff And that's really cool to see from Collin, because Collin was not necessarily that way for the whole season. Collin is pretty good. Collin's drive game is a 1.17, best on the team, but it's a 1.36 in the last period of time. So he's just about doubled it. And he's taken 20% of his drives here in the last stretch. So he's really picked it up. The unfortunate one is Taylor Horton-Tucker's gone the exact opposite direction. Taylor Horton-Tucker, for whatever reason, in this last stretch, has become, while previously having been on a nice uptick right before Mike got hurt, was on a super nice uptick, was playing much more efficiently out of the drive and out of the pick and roll, and he's unfortunately gone the other way at 0.55 points, or 0.44 points on drives. On the pick game, we're seeing the same great development. We're really seeing great development out of Jordan Clarkson, who, as much as we just talked about the burden he's got that he's not getting the same shots, he's really playing a pretty terrific pick and roll game, which is not something that's always been his forte. And with the amount of focus he has on him, it's really impressive. He's been the primary guy. And again, Collin Sexton's been outstanding. Just absolutely outstanding in the pick and roll game. And he's had to pick it up. Again, he's taken about 30% of his pick and rolls for the season in the last 5 games. Really, we'd gone away from him as a pick and roll option and let Mike and Jordan do almost all of that pick and roll action earlier this year. And Collin's efficiency is through the roof right now on his pick and roll game over the last little while. And the same story, Taylor Horton-Tucker, unfortunately, really struggling in that way. So just pure, hey, there's some areas where Collin as a distributor, needs to develop. I also think he's had his 2 best games of the year as a distributor. But those are some really encouraging, positive signs that Collin Sexton has done that. And it's another tribute to the way Jordan has expanded his game this year to really to grow and take on a larger burden and widen what he's capable of doing. It's neat to see. It's world's greatest players, world's greatest athletes in against the world's and developing and adding new things to your game. It's a pretty unique ability, and it's pretty great to watch. So keeping on that. All right, Clippers tonight, and we'll get ready. By the way, Collin's floater game is really good right now. He's 13 of 23 in the paint non-restricted. So's Jordan. That's the area of the paint non-restricted. Both of them playing a really, really good job in the floater game right now that's allowing them to do that. Jordan, by the way, has 24 assists in the last 3 games, which is great. And Malik Beasley over the last 5 games without Mike Conley, 36% from the field and 33% from 3. So that's been much more difficult for him without Mike Conley getting the ball. So those are the themes of kind of the impact on the shooting. But again, the offense has been pretty good, and Collin and Clarkson leading that in an impressive fashion. Clippers are clicking in without Paul George and without Norman Powell. Is that actually possible? Yes, it is. Look out. Here they come. And we've got them tonight. We'll talk about it coming up. Today's show is brought to you in part by ExpressVPN. We all know how ExpressVPN protects your privacy and security online, but here's something you might not know. You can also use ExpressVPN to unlock movies, shows that are available in other countries. Maybe you've run out of stuff to watch on Netflix. This will change your world. Allows you to binge like a UK Office or something like that. ExpressVPN lets you control where you want sites to think you're located. You can then choose from 100 different countries. So you imagine all the Netflix libraries you can get. Korean dramas, South Korean Netflix with your Netflix subscription, all sorts of things. All sorts of different ones. It's also not just on Netflix, just using it as an example for you. There are hundreds of VPNs out there, but the reason to use ExpressVPN is to watch shows is because it's ridiculously fast, never any buffering or lagging. You can stream in HD, no problem. ExpressVPN also works on all your devices, phones, media consoles, smart TVs, and more, so you can watch what you want on the big screen and go. If you want access to hundreds of new shows, go to expressvpn.com/lockedon right now, and you can get an extra 3 months of ExpressVPN for free. That's expressvpn.com/lockedon. expressvpn.com/lockedon to learn more. Thanks so much for making Locked On your first listen of the day. Locked On Sports Today, your second listen, as well as Locked On NBA for game to game. Clippers are in the house tonight. This is an interesting team. So they've won 5 out of 7. They've played 5 games without Paul George. They're the opposite of us. in the sense that every single player on their team has had to clip their wings to be able to play for this team. And now all of a sudden, without Paul George and without Kawhi Leonard, these guys get to go to work. So in the last 5 games, Norman Powell averaging 22 points, shooting 50% for the field, 52% from 3. He's gone from taking 10 shots a game to taking 14. He's probably ecstatic. Reggie Jackson's gone from taking, I think it was 8 shots a game to taking 14. He's averaging 15 points. He's not shooting it as efficiently as Norman Powell, but he's playing very well, averaging 7 assists. Zubac has been a beast. He had a monster game the other one night, 31 and 29. 71% from the field. He's getting 5 offensive rebounds a game over the last 5. We're going to have to be a little careful. Yes, he had 31 points and 29 rebounds the other night. John Wall stepping up as well. He's averaging 14. They have 7 players now who are averaging double figures over the last 5 games. And Amir Coffey's at 9. So this is clearly a group that, is relishing in the fact that they don't have Kawhi Leonard and Paul George, and because of that, they've actually won some games with an amazing come from behind last night against Portland that some of us, including myself, had to rewatch this morning because we had turned it off. Here's what's interesting about them. Remember we just talked about the Jazz defense and how they're doing a good job against the shot, but they're not doing the other things? So that's the Clippers offense. The Clippers are 29th in the league offensively, 29th out of 30 offensively, but they're the 11th best team in the league at the shot. This is actually concerning to me if I was a Clippers fan. So they're 11th in the league, 11th best shooting team in the league, 14th best three-point shooting team. They take an average amount of three-point shots, right on dead average, 35%. The league average right now, by the way, is 36% makes, 36% takes. 36% of your shots are threes and 36% go in. That's the league average. So they're 36.5 and 35%. Like they're right on dead on league average. I don't think they can really swing that and fix that a great deal. What's their problem is they're 26th in the league in taking care of the ball, turning it over 16.5% of the time. So good opportunity for us to get our turnovers back. They don't offensive rebound. They're 24th in the league in offensive rebounding, 25th in the league in offensive rebounding. So good chance for us to try to recover that. If they offensive rebound tonight, that's a bad sign for us. And they're 18th in the league at going to the free throw line. So when you look at the 4 factors, the shot, the turnover, the rebounding, the free throw attempts, they're good at the most important one, which is shooting. But they're bad at the other 3, and their roster actually just might not be very good at those things. So what my concern would be if I'm a Clippers fan is I don't know whether or not those other things are actually a great deal fixable. I don't know that I see the Clippers as being a team that suddenly starts taking care of the ball at a great rate. They're kind of a turnover-prone team with Paul George and Reggie Jackson. I don't know that I see a team that likes to pull Zubac and go small becomes a good offensive rebounding team. And they're never a team that goes to the free throw line a lot. And they're not a team that shoots at the rim a great deal. They're a little better this year than they have been in the past, but they usually are a team that averts their offense away from the rim just due to their personnel, not like, oh, let's not shoot at the rim on purpose. But the Clippers this year are 23rd in the league at shooting at the rim. And if you don't shoot at the rim, that's generally where fouls are drawn. Fouls are drawn on drives and right at the rim. They're actually drawn a little less at the rim than you think. They're drawn usually at about 8 to 12 feet out. But if you look at the Clippers last year, they were 28th in the league at shooting at the rim. So they're not going to be a team that suddenly becomes a massive free throw shooting team. So I would be a bit concerned as a Clipper fan of whether or not this offense actually is going to turn the corner. They're 24th in the league in the half court. They're 5th in the league in transition. So when John Wall or Reggie Jackson gets out and runs, they're pretty good. And so that's going to be the key for us in this game tonight is can you keep them in the half court, make them play half court basketball, and then can we clear the rebound? So those are the 2 keys for the game tonight. One other note of interest, by the way, just trying to understand like who we are, where we are. I think we got this great start and then we can't figure out why all of a sudden things have slipped a little bit. Similar team with actually much higher intentions, I think, of winning when the season started is the Portland Trail Blazers. And the Portland Trail Blazers, I believe Dame Lillard went out. I was trying to find the day in which Dame Lillard went out. I think Dame played his last game, if I remember correctly, against us when he strains the calf in that fabulous Saturday game when the Jazz and the went back 118-113. And since then, they've lost to the Bucks, the Cavaliers, beat the Knicks in overtime, lost to the Nets, and lost to the Clippers. So they're experiencing a very similar run. They got the one overtime win over the Knicks. They won that one close game, to their credit. And they had to go on the road as well. So they're now, and then they kind of got it brutal here. They went on the road, and then they play one game at home after an East Coast trip, and then they go to the road tonight to play the Lakers. I think they'll get throttled tonight. I mean, they were on the East Coast for the Knicks and the Nets on Sunday. They flew back one day to play the Clippers last night, somehow ran out of gas in the fourth quarter, no surprise. Go to a back-to-back in LA tonight on 3 a.m. They then do get Thursday and Friday off before they play us on the road on Saturday, before they get a 5-game homestand. A pretty brutal little stretch of schedule there for the Blazers. So not surprising, but worth noting that here's another team similar to us that lost their veterans kind of controlled guard who keeps everything together, and now they suddenly aren't winning ball games. All right, last thing tonight, our officials tonight are Rodney Mott, who is in his 25th year, has called 51 playoff games and no NBA Finals. Eric Dallin, who we like to call the Bull from Night Court, he's in his 15th season out of Minnetonka, Minnesota. I think he played football at the University of Minnesota, if I remember correctly. He has called one playoff game in 14 seasons. And our third official tonight is a non-roster official, Cherie Mitchell, number 98. That, my friends, is Locked on Jazz today. Hope you enjoyed. Have a wonderful day. We'll talk to you coming up on postcast after the game with Ron Boone, as well as Locked on Jazz tomorrow. Have a good one.